but I think you're seeing the beginning of what we are going to start dealing with. And let me take that a step further from an identity perspective. I'm guessing many people here, or at least some of the people listening to this and watching this, sold their DNA to a 23andMe. I say it that way because that's kind of what, it's kind of what happened here. That information, now that 23andMe is about to be sold, is going to end up in the hands of whoever buys it. I'm not saying they're evil or that 23andMe or that anything bad may happen, but I am bringing up the fact that your DNA, which is really your true identity, a component of your true identity, can now transfer hands out of your control. And what does that mean? And will there be a Jim McDonald version 100 years from now because of it?
I don't think that's possible. Sorry, Jim.
No way, man. You already tried to create one with the April Fool's episode.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm doing great, man. I just got a good chuckle listening to our AI episode again. For those who didn't know, put out a special episode on April 1st. Pretty funny. The good thing is, there's all this thing about, AI is going to take my job. I don't think it's going to take our podcast jobs, at least not within the next year or two.
Okay, so now you're really putting me under the gun here because we're actually recording this before that episode has gone live. And before you've had a chance to listen to the new version that I've put together. And so, yeah, I like where it's headed. I think it'll, be kind of entertaining. And it's something that I've actually been trying to do for years, ever since this whole AI craze came about. Obviously, it's quite ridiculous. Our voices are not at all, they're close, but not like, enough to be like, oh, is that really Jeff or is that not Jeff? Or is that really Jim or not Jim? So I made it very clear that those are AI Jeff and AI Jim.
Yeah. Well, AI is at the center, as we know, we've referenced many times. But I think we're safe for now. I mean, you're right. You did a really good job in terms of even like the last version I heard. But I think there's still an element, like we just had some good laughs with our guests today. We have good laughs with our guests every time, both on the show and getting ready to record. I think that just brings in, that spontaneity and, that camaraderie, brings an element to the show that AI just can't reproduce.
Not yet. It's very difficult to get AI to laugh without it saying like, ha, ha,
Yeah, ha, ha, ha. I just told a funny one.
Right, exactly. So anyway, it was an experiment, it's a one-off, but yeah, hopefully people dug it. And yeah, that's it.
We'll try it again next year, and maybe it'll be a little bit better every year until.
I mean, it has to be, right? This is the worst it will ever be, I hope.
Yeah.
It's just going to continue to get better. And there are certainly tools that are rapidly expanding and their capabilities, and it is expensive to do AI voice stuff. So it'll probably get cheaper too.
Yeah. I mean, even with like Copilot. So I'm part of a team at RSM, which is where we do our day jobs, which is like, experimenting with Copilot. And a lot of the feedback has been, it works great when I upload 4 or 5 documents to analyze. But if I give it like 70 documents, it just chokes and does nothing. And so I kind of think that's probably more with how much horsepower or the level of license that we have, because I think the AI can handle it, right?
It's very expensive. So without turning this into AI at the center, you have what's referred to as tokens, and the context window is basically how much information can you put in, and words take up a certain amount of tokens. And each, basically it's kind of like the length. And I'm sure somebody out there is like, no, you're totally wrong, but this is the way I understand it. Is you have a certain number of tokens that you can put into the response, and then there's a certain number of tokens that come out as part of that context window that it will kind of be able to refer to. So yeah, you could definitely upload too much information. Pro tip is try to do maybe one document at a time, 2 documents at a time, something that's much smaller. If it's a very big document, you might need to split up that document into different files as well. So yeah, it is. And again, it's the worst it will ever be right now.
Right.
It's only going to get better, but that's why and the larger, I think that's, one of the things that a lot of these AI firms are working on is trying to make that context window bigger, that token, the number of tokens allowed, right, et cetera. And that really does relate back to the cost it takes to chunk through each of those things and get things going.
Yeah, no. So really excited. I think we should get our conference code information out there and then introduce our guests. What do you think?
Yeah, let's talk about it. We've got a European Identity and Cloud Conference from Kumar Cole coming up. That's in Berlin. That's May 6th to 9th. Jim, you and I are going to be there, and we hope people will join us. If you use the code IDAC25MKO, that gets you 25% off of your registration. So that's pretty exciting. And then a couple weeks later, we've got Identiverse that's happening. That's June 3rd to the 6th. That's in Las Vegas. And if you use the code IDV25-IDAC25, that also gets you 25% off. So there's a nice little trend there. We'll have those in our show notes below if you're watching on YouTube in the description. And it's always on our website, idacpodcast.com, right on our homepage. Just scroll down beneath the listen or the watch buttons, and you'll see whatever we've got currently active there. So yeah, I'm excited for both those conferences. We've got some neat plans for both, and it's going to be interesting.
What's kind of crazy is like each of the conferences, we're busy dudes, man. I mean, especially at Identiverse, we're going to be on stage a couple of times each, sometimes together, sometimes apart. We're doing a number of podcast recordings at EIC. I'm going out there the week before. So if anybody's going to be in the Oslo area on Wednesday, April 31st, we're going to do an Identibeer. And I've never been to an Identibeer, like an official event. So it's going to be official. I'm hoping if you're there, you reach out and join us.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Jim is buying. I'm going to put you on the hook for that.
Sure, absolutely. All right, we do the sponsored episodes, right?
Yeah, exactly right. All right, why don't we get to our episode today? As indicated by the title that people probably read at this point, we're talking about Identity Management Day 2025, and we're welcoming back Jeff Reich. He's the executive director at the Identity Defined Security Alliance, or the IDSA. Welcome back to the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff, very much. And Jim, it's good to see you both again.
Yeah, I feel like we see each other at conferences here and there, and then we also, are very supporters of Identity Management Day. We have it linked on our own website, right at the top in the banner there. But why don't we get a little bit of an update maybe from the IDSA? Any news, developments, things that people should be aware of maybe that have taken place over the last several months?
Sure. I always like to talk about that. And Jim, I just want to say, if you are having beers on April 31st, I want to join you.
Will you be in Oslo?
Probably not, but on April 31st, I could be.
Okay. Well, we'll see you there, man. I
think this went right over Jim's head right now.
I think it might have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You probably meant April 30th, or maybe it's, what is it? The 2nd is a Friday, I think. Yeah. So there is no April 31st, Jim.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I couldn't resist.
Hey,
I'm all for
free
it.
beer tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm a true believer in that. And to get back to answer your question, Jeff, I haven't forgotten. Since we talked, which I think was about a year ago, about Identity Management Day 2024, a lot has happened. Obviously, Identity Management Day 2024 happened, where we had over 1,000 participants. We had people from 82 different countries. We had over 40 sessions. It was our first true around the world event. It was a 21-hour event, and we didn't learn enough. So we're doing it that way again this year. In addition to that, we put out our annual identity security research document, which was released at Identiverse actually last year. And a lot of good trends came out of that. It's been close to a year now, so there's no great surprises at this point anymore, except that identity really is the focus of everything. look at every single breach you see, look at every single compromise that exists. And even though it may not be the root cause of every single issue, it could have stopped the majority of issues from ever happening. And I'll use a recent, without getting political about it, a recent event that occurred that involved U.S. national security. Even though there was a root cause as to what may have really made it happen, in reality, it could have been avoided if identity and authentication had really occurred correctly throughout. So we're seeing that trend expand. The research last year said that over 95% of breaches, and I call that, I'll round up to 100, had identity associated with it. I think this year, when we do the research, which we moved to the fall, we're going to be releasing that in September. I think it's going to actually read 100%. I don't know how it couldn't.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I always just rounded it up to 100% anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But so Jeff, give us the 411 on Identity Management Day. So what is the date? What time do things get started? And how do people get registered?
So first of all, the date's right here. It's April 8th, 2025, and it's April 8th where you live. We start at midnight on April 8th, and that launches our Oceania Asia region, and that runs for about 7 hours with speakers from the Oceania Asia region. And that component also has a hybrid part to it, where people will be meeting in person in Melbourne, Australia. Now, not everyone can get to Melbourne, even if you're in the Oceania Asia region. So we're still streaming it online, but there is an in-person part. And to the earlier comment, I think it's in Australia and there may be beer involved after too. I heard a rumor about that.
Jeff, is that the first time that's been in person like that? Because I feel like it's been virtual maybe for the last couple of years, but maybe
it has been virtual since the beginning. This is our 5th this year. The first 3 were entirely virtual. And last year, 2 years ago, Melbourne started this event, but I streamed into Melbourne with a greeting, and then they had their own session. They just had a complete independent identity. Last year, we did this way with them, learned a lot of great lessons, learned that I'm not an event planner, and that making a hybrid event halfway around the world in another hemisphere and making it all work well, which because of a lot of people putting a lot of time, it did. And we felt so good about it. That's why we decided to do it again this year. So this is the second time where we actually have a synchronized, and I'll use that term, a synchronized hybrid event for the first of the 3 segments. Then we moved to EMEA. That's being headquartered out of Cairo. So there's going to be speakers from Egypt and Israel and Germany and Denmark and France. So, we have each region covered, and then we move to the Americas. And I have to live in a UTC or a GTM this year, a GMT rather, if you're still old fashioned about it, time zone, because it starts at midnight UTC and it goes until 2100. So wherever you are, you can see live events and sessions that apply to you, and it's going to be recorded as well.
That sounds so much fun. Jeff Stedman, I've got an idea. 1 year for Identity Management Day, we should start in Australia, both be there, do live streams, and then start taking planes west and try to see some of the live events, finishing in, I guess the final country would be West Coast of the U.S., Jeff?
Yeah, that could be where you do that, and I'll buy beers.
Wow.
I was going to say, if you buy the plane tickets, maybe.
I was going to say, yeah, that's big of you, Jeff.
Yeah,
Well,
Jeff, if I buy the plane tickets, I'm going.
Hey, that's fine. I'm happy to travel for it.
We'll travel.
It's almost like watching like the celebration wave, like go across the the world, right?
Yeah, this is a celebration.
Yeah, it is a celebration. So tell us more about what this event is all about.
Yeah. So by the way, although the URL isn't up there and it should be, you can register at identitymanagementday.org. Easy enough to remember. You just have to be able to spell. And you'll get it. It's free. All events are free in it. And as we have right now, 44 sessions lined up with about 50 speakers. I know we have registrants from around the world already. Obviously, time will tell by the time this airs as to how many we get from different countries. And that really interests us. a lot of what we're talking about this year is there is some AI. I heard you talking about AI earlier, and I'm of the opinion 2024 was a year of AI. It's going to grow. It hasn't peaked. It's by no means done. I believe in the identity space, 2025 is a year of the NHI, the non-human identity. And if we haven't focused enough on that yet, you're going to see probably at least a third of our sessions talking about NHI because it is truly a management issue for everyone that thinks, oh, I can just take an NHI and manage it just like someone's user ID. Doesn't work that way. Whether it's an ephemeris instance dealing in a container that starts and then stops and goes away, or it's a machine account that has to have its credentials, recast and reloaded once a month, or whatever it is you're doing. There's a whole bunch of different management techniques and tools needed compared to the carbon-based identities that we're used to dealing with. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. I'm excited about it. I like the different countries we have involved as speakers now. And in the Americas region, we do have sponsors. The other two don't. And those sponsors are going to have exhibit booths. And if you haven't been to one of our events before, and we hear this often, it's as if you were at an in-person conference without the travel and the smell, which is often what they say. And you can go right up to a booth and you go up to a booth and you're going to see someone and they'll talk to you. And as far as I know, they're not going to have any deep fake or AI images. They may, but I believe they're going to be real live people. You can download documents from them. You can watch videos. And for every one of those activities that a participant takes part in, they get points. And that's all gamified. So at the end of the Americas region, which is the end of the entire event, we have a leaderboard of top 3 point getters get prizes, and then there's prizes for each booth as well. So it ends up being a real educational, fun, international day that people can benefit from both emotionally, intellectually, and I guess financially, depending on what the prizes are. And the one thing I'm bringing up as well, with this year, there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of conflict, and a lot of people are doing a lot to stop it because obviously, not only are people's lives being altered, people's lives are being ended. And it would be nice if we could do that. And I'm by no means saying that Identity Management Day is the solution for world peace, but for 21 hours from an
You're
identity
not saying it's
perspective-
not.
No, I'm not denying it. I'm just not saying it is. But for 21 hours, we can all recognize that even though each one of us has our own identity, we are all of us together one, because we all have way too much in common to be able to do that. So I like to take the opportunity to say we are going around the world in a real peaceful way, saying we all work together for the same thing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Something else that's pretty cool. I started going through the agenda for Identity Management Day. I saw a couple of the speakers that are on the agenda. So Anders, I saw Henrique, people who are Identity at the Center alumni, if you will. Really exciting stuff. Talk to us a little bit about some of the agenda, what people can expect from the kind of content they're going to hear about that day.
So I've already mentioned, there's a lot that's going to be, there's going to be some on AI. There's going to be a lot on NHI. I've yet to mention the theme of this year's event, which is existential identity. And the more we work with this, we thought about it. I see reaction there to this because we struggled with what do we want the theme to be. Because last year it was identity management around the world, and that worked for a year, but it got really stale. So that was good. So what do we want it to be this year? And NHI kept coming up, and I didn't want it to be 2025, the year of NHI, even though I've already said that once today. That's not what I wanted the theme to be. So we came back and forth, and at some point someone said, some people are having an existential crisis about what their identity is and what it's being used to do. And it just came. All of a sudden, existential identity. Can you truly define who you are at any given point in time, doing any given function, and is that the only one of you? And where's that going? And without having to get too serious about it, I think if you just look at it from that perspective, all of our identities, I believe, are about to start being reformed in a way that, you're still going to be Jim and Jeff, please. But although the AI discussion you had, man, maybe not. But I like to think that now we're going to look at how are we being used when at some point. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm going to go off on a tangent. Imagine that. If you in St. Petersburg, Florida, there is the Salvador Dali Museum. If you've never been there, it's actually pretty interesting. You don't have to spend all your time at the beach. Find a rainy day and go to the Salvador Dali Museum. It not only does it have a lot of his art, which you may or may not appreciate, but there is an AI focused generative image of Dali that can answer your questions. And it's just many steps past the Disney animatronic characters. Abe Lincoln saying Gettysburg Address.
Does it actually answer the questions though, or does it just give you more riddles or more other things to think about?
Well, it's kind of both. It's not a true interactive ask me a question and let's have a debate. That won't happen. But if you ask some questions, it will give you an answer that may be different from an answer it gave before. So I don't know the programming behind it, so I can't say for sure if it's simply randomized or what. But the reason I bring it up is not because I'm either a huge fan of Dali or I'm trying to sell tickets to the museum, but I think you're seeing the beginning of what we are going to start dealing with. And let me take that a step further from an identity perspective. I'm guessing many people here, or at least some of the people listening to this and watching this, sold their DNA to a 23andMe. I say it that way because that's kind of what, it's kind of what happened here. That information, now that 23andMe is about to be sold, is going to end up in the hands of whoever buys it. I'm not saying they're evil or that 23andMe or that anything bad may happen, but I am bringing up the fact that your DNA, which is really your true identity, a component of your true identity, can now transfer hands out of your control. And what does that mean? And will there be a Jim McDonald version 100 years from now because of it?
I don't think that's possible. Sorry, Jim.
No way, man. You already tried to create one with the April Fool's episode. But here's what I was thinking as you're talking about all of that is like, what is an identity? What gets an identity? What is an identity for a person? Because we talk about the identity of things. Does a thermostat qualify as an identity? Is it just anything that has a chip in it? That's an identity. What about my bottle of soda? Is that an identity? Like, where does it end? I think for me, an AI, probably if the AI is responsible for making decisions, is an identity. What do you think?
Oh, no, I completely agree. I think if any AI or even more basic machine learning can make decisions based on context, rules, and input, then there's an identity associated with it. Now, back to what you were referring to earlier, I'm not ready to say that your bottle of soda is an identity, and you just drained the identity out of it. But anything with a chip in it is not necessarily doesn't necessarily have an identity. See, now you made me thirsty just looking at that. I don't think everything with a chip has an identity, but any device with a chip that has to communicate with something else has an identity. And if it didn't, how would the receiving end of it know who it was that was communicating? And you notice I said who, I should have said what, but yeah.
Is there a concept of an account? Is an account and identity, are they basically synonymous? I don't think they are. I think an identity is, I have an identity, I have a number of accounts, and a thermostat sending data to something, I don't really think that is an identity. I think of that as it has an account so that it can get to the API to dump the data. It's just He's just a silicon wafer.
Jeff, this is something like Jim and I have gone back and forth on a couple times, is this concept of identity and account. And I take a looser interpretation, I guess, of it. Jim, would that be fair? Like, where it's not just humans. I feel like a non-human can also have an identity. That's why we call it non-human identity. But there's a lot of gray in there. Thermostat's a good one. I've got 2 smart thermostats in my house. Who do they belong to? I guess ultimately they roll up under me.
They belong to you. You're the identity.
But I've also set up an identity for my house. So in Google Home or in Apple's HomeKit, you establish a virtual construct of your home, and then you assign devices. I mean, I must have like 50 smart devices in my house, but they're all the home smart devices, if that makes sense. Now, ultimately, the home, is my responsibility, and so it rolls up under me. But each of those things definitely needs an account, but I feel like they do need an identity as well to be able to say, okay, well, this is my thermostat. This is my smart lights, or, my cameras, or whatever it may be, right? Things like that. And I guess I'm not sure what I'm saying, other than it's like this identity and account thing. Maybe it's a little grayer than I was thinking.
Yeah. I think that people just use the term loosely. I think it's like the word roles. Like, people use the word roles if they're application developers. It's like, these are the roles within our application. If they're IGA administrators, talking about a role is like a grouping of entitlements that can cross multiple applications. Get those 2 points of view talking, there's a collision because we're not using common vernacular. And I just think that this whole idea of, non-human identities, maybe I'm just getting hung up on the word because it is what it is, but I don't think in many cases that they are identities. I think they're accounts.
So I can see your point of view. And first of all, I want to thank both of you for taking this discussion right along the existential identity theme, because I believe
we got
that's
profound
exactly
real quick.
Yeah, but that's exactly how we came up with the theme. In fact, they may end up becoming the theme of IDSA. I think it's going to be around for a while, probably longer than me. But to answer your question, Jim, do you know what this is?
Remote control.
Yes, very good. Okay, you passed the test.
A 20/20 vision, not quite.
Yes, but what action did you take? What did you do to tell me what it was? You looked at it, but then what did you do?
I processed it in my brain.
Mm-hmm. And you identified it.
I used my brain.
Yes, you identified it.
Right.
And if you look at the root of the word of identity, they both come from the same root. So the reason I believe that an account is part of an identity, just like DNA is part of an identity. DNA doesn't have your personality. It can help influence how your personality is going to manifest itself. So it all combines to be part of a carbon-based human identity. But for a machine identity, the reason I think it's important is that, Jeff, with your 2 thermostats, you have one in room A and one in room B. And you probably label them differently, in whatever application you use for that.
Absolutely.
And when the communications occur, which thermostat, you're identifying which thermostat is sending that signal. You can identify which thermostat to send a signal to say, turn the temperature up or down. So because you have to identify it, I posit that there is an identity associated with it. I'm not going to say that there's either a consciousness or a soul or a spirit associated with it, but there is an identity associated with it.
Yeah, you have to assume that, like, you've got that one thermostat probably has a bunch of service accounts running on it somewhere, right? Little microprocessors, there's probably APIs that it's hitting. And each of those endpoints that it's trying to communicate to needs to identify, what is this thing trying to get to me? Hopefully they're doing security behind it, right? Things like that. So to me, that's an identity. Like, my thermostat, yes, it has an identity. It sounds weird to say that, right? Or, my smart ring has an identity. This is how things communicate back and forth. And then an identity might have a bunch of different accounts beneath it. I think where you draw and Jim, I kind of get it from your perspective. Okay, well, where do you draw the line of identity? Is it human? Is it not human? Does my collection of Apple devices, is that my Apple identity because I have a MacBook, an iPad, a watch, a phone, whatever else it's probably out there? Like, where do you draw the line is probably what I'm thinking that you're thinking about. Is that right, Jim?
Yeah, well, I take that Apple example. I mean, you could potentially, the identity is still you. Like, I think if you asked Apple, like, what's my identity? It's Jeff Sedman, and you have maybe an Apple device issued by your company, and you have to have an Apple ID from your company, and you have to have an Apple ID for personal. Does that make, are those two identities? Or is it, you're the account owner, it's one identity, and those are your accounts?
So let me pose a question from that. When you sell your watch, what happens to the identity?
Right. You deassociate it with from the primary identity associated with it.
Yeah, you disassociate it with yourself, but the actual identity of the watch can't change. Otherwise, whoever buys it next will never be able to activate it.
That's that MAC address.
Yep.
You can't have more than one.
Right. So maybe,
well,
so
that's how
maybe
the theory
that's what.
goes. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
So it becomes it becomes an existential crisis right now that I don't think is dooming us in any way, but it is something we have to figure out, because if we run fast headlong into the let's just have non-machine identities and let's have AI drive it, I'm not saying the robots are going to take over the world. I'm not. Well, yeah, they could, but for now, I'm not going to say they will. But we run the risk of getting to a place where we have IPv6 won't handle enough addresses, and we have all of these identities that are impossible to manage. And how do we line that up, and how do we categorize them? And Jim, there has to be a voice of reason like you that says, well, where do we draw the line? And what is simply a machine that has an account versus an identity? I think it's in our future. The answer to that's in our future.
Now, what happens when quantum comes around and everything is true and false at the same time? Now, then we're really screwed. Talk about existential identity. Your quantum state is going to be a big part of that.
Well, yeah, but the good thing about quantum state is it either exists or it doesn't.
Well, so, if you're a your superposition, you could be both. So what are the odds that you exist versus the odds that you don't exist is really the calculation you're trying to perform. Well, let's just say, so we put IPv6 in because IPv4 wasn't enough. So IPv8, IPvQ for quantum, right? We have to come up with some way to keep identifying devices, give it a serial number of some sort, some unique identifier.
Exactly. There's an identity associated with each piece of space junk. Think about how many items there are there. There's an identity associated with every known star. See, I knew I'd be able to bring that in. And we don't even know about all of them. We haven't even scratched the surface on them. So identity means a lot more than it's my name and my body. I mean, that's important. And for humans, that's where it starts and where the core needs to be. Where do we draw the line, and how do we define everything else that's part of it, especially when you have non-human identities and AI starting to mingle and determine what we're going to be working with going forward.
Yeah, go back to the star item. I mean, you can purchase an identity for a star, right? You can name a star. So if we wanted to, Jim, maybe that's something we do is we buy a star. We call it Identity at the Center or IDSA or something like that. What do you think? Is that a good way to spend our funds?
That means that the podcast will live on forever, right?
Well, this is on the internet, so you have to assume it'll be there forever. Somebody is going to be looking or listening to this podcast in the year 3000 and be like, man, look at these cavemen talking about these identity concepts.
And you're thinking it's going to live forever on Earth. It's actually going to live forever everywhere, because there are radio waves associated with, even if you're not broadcasting through an antenna, that are going to work their way out to the universe. And at some point, sometime in the future, there'll be some creature that will know how to receive and interpret these. And they're going to say, whoa, look at this Earth. What are they thinking?
Yeah. So, Jeff Reich, another question. Another big topic with AI and identity is this agentic AI, so that there's going to be these AI agents everywhere. And how do you manage identity when it comes to, is that something that your speakers are going to get into during Identity Management Day?
I saw at least one abstract that had the word agentic in it. And my guess is it'll probably be a couple. It's probably a bit early to really start talking about what that means for identity, because we're still at the point where, whether it's from Google or Microsoft, really, we're starting to even figure out what does agentic AI rather really mean, and what can you do with it? And, back to the quantum decision, I think we're going to have more democratization of quantum computing before agentic AI can really take off, because it doesn't take much to say, "Ooh, I want to do this and this and this," and your CPU melts because you can't handle all of that input. So right now, that's a good limiting factor, I think, to our benefit. But that is, yet again, another thing to figure out. So I think it's a bit early. You're going to hear agentic AI, and there has to be an identity associated with it. The question then becomes, what sort of intelligence is truly associated with that agentic identity? Because every time it performs a task, it knows more. It doesn't mean it's smarter, but it knows more.
I think agentic AI is kind of the next big thing in this world of AI, because it is a proactive, typically, process that's running. It's something that's out there. And I think this is what a lot of security companies are looking at is, how do we make our software more secure? How do we make our systems more secure? And if you've got a 24/7 AI that is constantly evaluating, trying to find threats, et cetera, and it has the autonomy to do something about it. I think that's the big part about the agentic side is right now, the most basic use case is you think about something like, all the deep research and deep seek type things where it's taking a multi-step approach to say, let me research this topic and search these different websites or resources and then compile this report, right? That's an early form of that agentic AI. But imagine a day when, you've got AI identities running around your infrastructure, and they might even not even be bound to a specific device or platform or system. It could be a generalized agentic AI that is looking at all these things as a holistic approach that says, oh, okay, hey, we noticed that this firewall was misconfigured and we fixed that. Hey, we noticed this S3 bucket was misconfigured. Let's fix that. And it's constantly sort of evaluating. And now I'm starting to feel like I'm getting into the Matrix, right? Or any sort of sci-fi in the future where you've got AIs talking to each other. And I've kind of joked with sources. I'm like, well, you AIs figure it out and then let me know what you decide as the human. And I think that's a big step that's going to come through. But each of those AIs is going to have some sort of non-human identity associated with it, because how else are you going to track who did what? Or in this case, what did what? I think it's a really important topic to get into as part of this evolution of where we're going for both, not just AI, but how we're going to manage the identities on it.
Yeah, and what knows what?
Yeah, what knows what does who? There's a whole bunch of different stuff
I'm
going on.
staying away from the what does who. Thank you very much.
I know one of the things that comes up through Identity Management Day are the awards. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what those awards are, and kind of give us a preview. You don't have to spoil it, right? It's coming up. I think this will air probably the day before this goes live, or before the awards get announced. But if you can kind of preview, what are the awards, who are they for, and what should people expect about that?
The awards will be announced at the beginning of the Americas region. That will be at, I believe, 10 a.m. Eastern. I have to get my head out of UTC here, on the 8th in the U.S. And there are 4 categories, and the opportunity to submit nominees have closed by the time you're seeing this. But the 4 categories are the SMB, or small medium business identity project of the year. What identity project made the most difference in a small or medium business? What enterprise project of the year? What identity project made the biggest difference for an enterprise? There's 2 other awards. There is the identity professional of the year, and that could be anyone that just either a champion for identity, or someone that invented something, or is just people identify identity with them and make it go forward. And the 4th category is the best innovative use of new technology and identity. And last year, we really had to push to get nominees for that topic. I think everyone was afraid to. That is now the largest number of submissions we've received. So in a year, that sea change has occurred. A lot of people are saying, hey, you can use identity in an innovative way to really help drive the business. And isn't that a good thing for us rather than, oh, you're a cost center, just reset the password and go away?
How does someone nominate for these things? I mean, it's probably too late for this year, but if I'm thinking about it as a goal, maybe for like next year to get nominated for something, is it self-nomination? Do you need to have someone else nominate for you? Maybe it's different based on the type of awards. Like how can people get involved with this and really kind of make this, I hate to say it, but like the Emmys or the Oscars, for identity, where it's like, hey, this is a big thing. Yeah, the IDs, yeah, that'd be great.
So thank you. I'm going to use that and I'll give you credit for it. We essentially have no rules. We have an online form you fill out from our website, which is idsalliance.org. And remember to register for the event. And you can still do it even after the event. You can register and see some recordings, but it's identitymanagementday.org. You just go to that site, click the award you want to submit, and that's it. We just ask for information. You can nominate yourself. We're not worried about you having to have any friends. That's okay. You can nominate yourself. You can nominate your company. You can nominate another company. You can nominate your customer's company. We've had someone that's nominated their ID supplier. Although it is the only rule we have is vendors can't participate in this because vendors, let's face it, they're usually on the leading edge. So we keep them out of the awards. But beyond that, there's really no rules. Just fill out a form. It's simple. If it takes you 5 minutes, you're a slow typist.
And what do you look for in a nominee? Is there a panel that reviews it? Are you looking for originality or consensus? I guess kind of talk me through, like, I want to make a good case for this next year, right? If I'm listening to this, how do I sell myself on that?
Well, the one thing that all 4 awards have in common is, did the submitter demonstrate that there was movement made because of either that individual, professional of the year or the innovative use or the project of the year? So we really look for how much movement occurred. We take into account the maturity of the individual or organization. There's nothing, a lot of people said, well, I've only been doing this for 2 years, so I can't be the professional of the year. Not true. How much movement, how much of a change are you making happen versus how much stuff and how long have you been doing it? It's not a lifetime achievement award. Maybe one day we will have one of those, but it is really Identity Professional of the Year or Project of the Year. So the submitter needs to be able to demonstrate, here's where we were before, and here's where we were after. That's really all we look for. And our planning committee for Identity Management Day ends up being the review judging committee for that. And, we always end up having discussions like you're going to, different perspectives, different people. They can submit someone, but obviously they have to recuse themselves from voting on that when they do. But we always end up with, when we have the 4 listed, everyone's in full agreement and supportive and say, yep, those are the right ones.
Okay, my last and final question, maybe the most important. How do you stay awake for 21 hours for Identity Management Day if you're starting at 0 and going to 21 on UTC time?
So I've discovered that there is a difference between being awake and being lucid. I can stay awake for 21 hours. And did you ever drive home? Like, if you drive to work and you drive home and you get home one day and you realize, wow, I don't even know how I got here. And let's assume that you weren't drinking or anything. And I mean, I drove home. I'm sure I went the same way. Did I stop at that red light? And then you check, and I promise you'll do this. If you think about this enough, you'll go see if there's any dents or scratches on your car. Then you realize, well, things must have gone well. Part of it is that, and I'm not going to say when and where that happens because I'd like to think everyone's going to get as much attention of my attention as you can. But caffeine helps at different times. 20-minute power naps. Like if a session starts and I know it's going well and I know this is not the first time someone's done this, I'll grab a few winks. and I have multiple alarms because you run the risk if you're an hour 18 and you take a nap, like it's going to take a lot to wake you up. But that's pretty much it. A couple 20-minute cat naps, but for the most part, there's a lot of good people supporting this. And they're always telling Courtney and me, you can go sleep for a few hours. And we always say, yeah, I think I may try that. And we never do.
Well, I'm excited for this. April 8th, I am registered, so I will be attending as much as I can. So people can check it out. We'll have links in our show notes for people to check it out. Identity Management Day 2025 is exciting stuff. Let's see. Let's end on a lighter note. And I have a would you rather question for today. So Jeff, as our guest of honor, I'll let you go first. And then Jim, I want your thoughts. Would you rather give up salt or sugar when it comes to food?
Okay, knowing that I'm always going to have the amount I need.
Yes. Jim, I know you're probably concerned about the nutrients here around this.
You stole my answer.
Yeah, I am. So I'm sorry. I didn't give your answer.
Let's assume health is not a part of this. It is purely just the flavor profile of salt versus sugar. So
I'll give up salt only because I've never liked salt. I dislike it. I don't like sugar that much, but I really dislike salt. So if it has to be a binary choice, salt goes away.
What about like a nice steak or pizza or cheese or things like that? Nothing?
So let me qualify the answer with I'm a vegan. So steak and cheese don't really matter too much to me. And for the record, it's not a fad. I've been a vegan now for over 30 years. And there was a reason for it, and I stuck with it. But no, we don't have table salt in our house. And it's not because, and I have low blood pressure. So, sometimes low blood pressure, but that's not why I avoid salt. I just never cared for it. I never like anything salty. I like savory. You give me all the peppers you want in the world and I'll eat them nonstop. But I just never cared for salt. And I don't really add sugar to much either. But if I had to choose, I'll take sugar over salt just because salt is pretty much distasteful to me.
Okay. Jim, how about yourself? Would you rather give up salt or sugar?
Like I said, Jeff Rich stole my answer because he hinted like if you have enough to survive. So I had an easy answer when I heard this question was salt, of course, because without salt, you die. Without sugar, you don't die. You don't necessarily die.
But you don't really live either, man.
You don't need carbohydrates. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate, right? There's essential fats. Protein is essential to survival. And here's the thing. I'm an outright sugar addict. I like salt. So this is a rotten question.
That's the whole point, though, is to make you think.
That's the whole point, right? So here's my answer, is I would give up sugar, actually, because the effect of giving up sugar is like enormous health benefits. There's actually plenty of people cut sugar from their diet and they lose weight and their body, they have all kinds of great effects. It would be hell to go through to get there, but you give me a binary choice and I choose sugar. I'd cut sugar.
So I'm with you, Jim, on this one. I love both sugar, salt, but I don't know how I could live without salt for just the flavor profile. I love salt. I'm like the opposite, Jeff. Sea salt, table salt, garlic salt. I think there's just a variety of different seasonings that or salt is such an important part of it. And I do this staring off to my side here where I have a bag full of chocolate covered walnuts and chocolate covered almonds. And I'm still saying, I have to give up sugar. Jim, I knew you were going to go the health angle with it. Like in my mind, that was like a given because I'm like, oh yeah,
you've known me long enough. Come on.
Yeah, of course. But I can't. My life would be, my food would be too boring without salt. And so I'm with you. I would drop the sugar. Jeff, as you hear Jim and I talk through our reasoning for this, how crazy are either of us?
Oh, no, I knew before this question that you were both crazy. but relative to this question, I think you're both spot on to what makes your identity who you are. By the way, if you think food's too boring without salt, I do propose that try different peppers too. They're there as well. I'm not saying you should give up salt. But there's other things out there.
Are we talking spicy peppers or like, I guess, are there any kind of pepper?
The whole spectrum from bell pepper to Carolina Reaper and everything in between.
That is a wide
peppers.
range right there.
Very
I
wide.
like peppers. It's not that I don't like that stuff, but I would just put salt on that pepper. That's all.
Well, Jeff, since in honor of Jeff Reich, our vegan friend, throw meat into that. Would you give up sugar, salt, or meat?
Well, that's an easy one though, right, Jeff?
Oh yeah, I already gave you
not
my
for him.
answer.
What would you give up? I'd give up sugar.
Oh, what are we giving up? Salt, sugar, or meat?
Yeah.
You know what? I think I could give up meat before those two. And I love a good steak. You know me and my I still dream about that Wagyu steak we had in Vegas like a decade ago. So I would give up meat before I'd give up salt and sugar. You're like,
man.
That's not the answer you were expecting from me?
No, I mean, I wasn't sure what you would go with. I mean, again, miserable question, right? But I would still give up sugar. I couldn't give up meat very easily.
Yeah, let's be
Unless
clear.
I had
I'm
like
not giving
a
up any
hard
of them.
workup and they were like, dude, you don't stop eating meat, you're a dead man. Then,
There's some people who choose to continue to eat the meat.
Yeah, you're right.
So Jeff, you and I are actually a quantum entanglement. We're both Jeff.
Yep.
But we end up being reverse sides of the coin, at least on this. And I know the ideal gift for Jeff, Sedman, should I ever decide to get you a gift.
Okay.
Sea salt covered caramels.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
chocolate
Now we're
caramels.
talking.
See, that has to be, there's the best of both worlds for you.
I was going to say that you can't go wrong with that kind of stuff. I mean, sea salt on chocolate is fantastic. I just love salt. I mean, what can I say? I'm just a salt nut. Okay, we got ridiculous at the end, but I appreciate Jeff sticking with us through that. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this week. I'll have links again in our show notes. Connect with Jeff on LinkedIn, learn more about the IDSA, and definitely get out there, register for Identity Management Day 2025. There's a lot of content, and like you said, Jeff, is you can watch it even after the fact, right? So if there's things that maybe you miss, you'll be able to kind of go back and kind of review that. So it's exciting stuff. It's a great time of year. It's time to celebrate, right? All the work that we do throughout the year and celebrate all the I am heroes that are out there. And there's a lot of you guys who are listening who are absolutely I am heroes for your organization. And whether you know it or not, you probably are. So take the time, celebrate, and spread the word. Right? Let's get more people involved with this, and let's turn this into the IDs or the Oscars or the Emmys for the identity space. And maybe we can make that happen in the future.
I'll even wear a tux.
There you go. If that's not incentive enough, I don't know what is. Okay. Thanks everybody for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with everybody in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.